The streets are empty, the surrounding vacation homes deserted, the window shades closed. The hazy sky creates a somber atmosphere. The usual impression during the off-season in areas marked by tourism. I'm standing a little above the center of the town of Gérardmer, which is located at the eastern end of the lake of the same name. The town lies in the middle of the Vosges Mountains and has been considered the pearl of the mountain range in northeastern France for centuries. As early as 1875, the first tourist office in the country was established here, and for many years the development of tourism benefited from a railroad connection. To this day, the area around Gérardmer is characterized by tourism. And as in many other places in the Vosges, winter sports have a long tradition here. The second largest ski area in the Vosges extends over the slopes of Mauselaine above the town. Already since the 60s, countless of the country's typical Poma lifts are in operation here. I have been to Gérardmer many times. To ski, to hike, to enjoy the fabulous views from the Vosges peaks up to the Alps. But today I'm here for a different reason. An entry in a reference list with a link to a well-known Swiss roadway manufacturer made me wonder. Willy Bühler is one of the pioneers of Swiss chairlift and surface lift construction in the 1960s and 1970s. His standardized and compact designs are cheaper to manufacture than those of his direct competitors and are groundbreaking for roadway construction in general. It is Bühler who, from the end of the 1960s, is the first to rely on hydraulic-based tensioning of the whole rope, thus eliminating the need for constructions with heavy counterweights. This principle would later become the standard for almost all roadways. The system also proves to be ideal in particular for glacier lifts, which have to be realigned on a regular basis due to movements of the ice. As a result, Bühler's designs reach even the highest regions of the Alps. The innovative capacity of this small company does not go unnoticed by the top dogs in roadway construction. And so it comes about that the Von Roh Group from Bern takes over the Bühler company in 1975 and henceforth markets the designs under its own name. In its comparatively short history in roadway construction, Bühler thus fails to achieve the great international breakthrough. The vast majority of his installations are built on Swiss soil. Occasionally, however, the company also delivers to neighboring countries. About a dozen T-bars even find their way to North America. Bühler is also able to export some surface lifts to France. In some cases, copies of identical design are also built there by local licensees. And exactly two such Bühler-designed surface lifts are said to be located here, in the Vosges Mountains in Gérardmer. An early predecessor of today's roadways? The name Tête du Costet at least suggests some kind of affiliation. A road very close to the present ski resort bears this name. But the technical data do not match the relief of the slopes at Mauselaine. Too short, too steep, too low. I therefore extend my research. With their extremely low altitude between 720 and 870 meters, the surface lifts must have been located near the town. Presumably on a north-facing slope, because even at the time of their construction in the 1960s, this was probably the only place where there was a reasonably safe snow situation. And indeed, on a historical aerial photograph, I finally discovered two objects not far from today's ski area that appear suspicious. In 1968, two surface lifts are indeed visible on the north side of Tête du Costet. The characteristic shadows of the towers leave no doubt. they must be the two surface lifts I am looking for. While at the time the area is probably used for agricultural purposes, a look at a recent aerial photograph shows dense forest at this point. The operations must have ceased at an early stage, because already on photographs from the 1970s, the present trees are recognizable in a smaller form. Today, a house stands at the former top station of the upper of the two surface lifts. To find traces here, virtually in the middle of the town, seems to be impossible after all this time. But while examining a current aerial photograph, something catches my eye. Although some houses have been added in the area of the bottom station during the last half-century, the slope where the lift was located is still undeveloped. Exactly at the location of the bottom station, a brown frame is also visible. Just a few bushes, an old tree, or perhaps some remains of a surface lift after all? This is what I try to find out on site on this November morning. Because there's no one at home in the surrounding vacation homes, I can start my research undisturbed and unobserved. I walk a short road uphill to be able to see behind the houses that I've found on the aerial photographs. At first, there's no real difference to the front. Here too, I encounter an abandoned parking lot and countless nettles. Sobered, I realize that there's nothing suspicious to see. But suddenly, something shimmers between a few gnarled branches. In front of the turbulent and same-colored background, the structure does not attract attention at first glance. The outlines of a rusty steel girder are only vaguely recognizable. It takes a moment until I can grasp the reality. At the end of the forest, there is indeed the almost completely preserved station of a surface lift. All of a sudden, euphoria sets in. Via a completely soaked meadow, I find my way to the station. Rust is omnipresent here. Countless trees have grown during the last half-century. Nature at Tête du Costet is fighting its way back. From a distance, the station is hardly recognizable as such. But even the control box, the sheave trains and the yellow bull wheel are still in place. Only the counterweight lies on the ground, covered in moss. The surface lift dates back to the time when even Bühler still relied on conventional tensioning of the whole rope with counterweights. Thus, it is certainly one of the last remaining copies of this design. On closer inspection, I am astonished to see that the whole rope is also still in place. The sheave trains are hanging a bit crooked in the air, but the rope still runs between them. Maybe the bottom station is not the only relic left? At least the historical aerial photos indicate that the two surface lifts still subsisted long after operations ceased. However, due to the increasingly dense forest, no more details are recognizable on the photos from the 1990s onwards. Is it possible that they were never dismantled? I tried to recognize something at the edge of the forest, but the thicket above the bottom station is impenetrable. The rope disappears between the branches, but for me it is impossible to get through. Instead, I decide to walk up to the present ski area at Mauselaine. From there, a small path that crosses the slope halfway up should be accessible. The hope of finding more relics at this point seems not unjustified after the successful start. At Mauselaine this morning, there's absolutely nothing to indicate that such a baffling surface lift mystery exists just a few hundred meters away. The spacious parking lot at the main entry point to today's ski area of Gérardmer is largely empty. Only a few hikers have parked their cars at the far end. Under a new chairlift and various Poma lifts, they walk up towards the Grand O, the second highest point of the ski area at 1100 meters. On the other hand, no one seems to be interested in the path towards Tête du Costet. The access to the narrow path is located somewhat inconspicuously behind a ski rental. Anyone who is not consciously looking for the path will probably hardly find it. It runs adventurously along the steep slope. With the ground completely soaked due to the rain of the previous days, every step has to be well planned. The fact that the path, according to a wooden board lying on the ground, bears the name Chemin du Pendu, which translates as Path of the Hanged Man, does not exactly inspire confidence either. But curiosity and a thirst for adventure soon make the arising doubts disappear. The path goes deeper and deeper into the forest, and soon there is no longer any sign of the sun shining through the clouds. At times, the path is barely visible due to the darkness and the wet leaves on the ground. After a while, I come across a fork. On the right-hand side, the way descends towards the lower edge of the forest. For the moment, I, on the other hand, choose the path that leads straight ahead along the slope. On a small hill, I stop briefly to orientate myself. Upslope, I see several comparatively small trees, which somehow don't quite want to fit into the rest of the scenery. Also, the ground turns out to be unnatural at this place. The banking of the subsoil, slightly diagonal to the slope, speaks a clear language. The former forest aisle must have been a part of one of the two surface lifts. Instinctively, I push a few branches aside and take a few steps uphill, but soon I realize that it is impossible to get through here. Nor can I make out any remains in the form of towers or foundations. It takes me a while to find a route between the trees back to the path. I already want to continue walking when I suddenly notice a familiar pattern in the corner of my eye. A few steel girders, an engine, and a yellow bull wheel. It is right in front of me, the bottom station of the second surface lift. Now there is no longer any doubt. The lifts at Tête du Costet were apparently never actually dismantled, but have been rusting here in the forest since operations ceased in the early 1970s. Also from the upper section, the bottom station is still almost completely preserved. However, in contrast to the lower section, the sheave wheels are missing and the control box is no longer attached to the station girders. I finally find it a few meters below the station, covered by moss and already half sunk into the ground. The exploration around the bottom station reveals even more details. Next to the station, I come across two wooden poles, probably part of a power line from the valley to the upper section. Right next to the path are two suspicious-looking objects, which at first I think are tree trunks. But on closer inspection, it becomes clear. They are the two former towers of the surface lift. Here too, however, the corresponding wheels are lost. Instead, the wound-up haul rope emerges from between the many leaves on the ground. And finally, I discover the girders and the bull wheel of the top station. It is hard to believe. The complete upper surface lift is buried in the undergrowth next to its bottom station. Thrown in a pile, probably under the assumption that no one will ever look for it here. The whereabouts of the upper surface lift thus seem to have been clarified. But one question remains. How did these parts get here? A closer study of the historical aerial photographs reveals that the upper surface lift remained unchanged until at least the end of the 1970s. It was not until the 1980s, when the vacation homes that still exist today were built on Tête du Costet, that the top station disappeared. This finding leads to only one conclusion. When the houses were built, more than a decade after operations of the surface lift ceased, the upper section must have been partially dismantled. But instead of removing the top station and the towers, they were disposed of next to the bottom station in the dark forest. This must be the feeling of hikers who always find some badly buried bodies in the forest in criminal cases, I say to myself as I continue on my way. In this case, fortunately, it's only about the corpse of a surface lift, but it still has a smack to it. But that's exactly what makes the adventure. However, the search for remains is not yet over with the discovery of the second surface lift. Somewhere in the immediate surroundings must be the top station of the lower section. Since it seems that the whole rope is still attached to the surface lift, finding it should not be a big task. But along the path, once again, there's not really much to see. Without knowing where to look exactly, it is extremely difficult to spot remains in the dense vegetation. After a few hundred meters, I finally reach a clearing. A part of the former ski slope? Apart from that, there seems to be nothing suspicious on this part of the trail. No station, no towers, and especially no haul rope. I decide to walk back to the fork to try my luck on the lower trail. This would have to cross the surface lift in any case. But just a few steps from the clearing, my leg suddenly gets caught in a cable lying on the ground. A part of a fence? In any case, it's not a haul rope. Nevertheless, the matter seems suspicious to me. I follow the cable uphill for a few meters. Slowly it begins to dawn on me what this could be. It is the communication cable that connects the bottom station with the top station of the lower surface lift. And it doesn't take long before I find what I'm looking for. Just a few meters above the path, but still barely visible, is the top station of the lower surface lift. I try to find a way between the branches to reach the upper bull wheel. Except for the stabilizing girders on the back, everything is still in place at this station. Even the characteristic sheave wheels, with their red color, are still hanging there. Only the haul rope has disappeared. After some searching, I find the rope in the steep terrain below the station. Only a few sections are still visible, the rest is buried under leaves, moss and soil. Sometime in the last 50 years, there must have been a huge crash here when the rope, presumably triggered by some fallen tree, disconnected from the bull wheel in the top station and flew through the forest. It didn't get far thanks to the countless other trees. On what is most likely the only tower of the lower surface lift, it is even still partially resting on the sheave trains. Once again, the tower is indistinguishable from the surrounding trees from a distance, and it is only recognizable as such when I stand directly in front of it. It is located right next to the lower of the two paths that I encounter here after scrambling through the terrain. A haul rope, partly supported by branches, partly pressed towards the ground, and a massive foundation have survived here. The tower stands there like a monument, as a reminder of the time when the dream of a small ski resort became reality on this slope. How many skiers once used this surface lift? Who were the initiators of this ski resort? Why did the end follow so abruptly? The exploration on site cannot give answers to these questions. Information about this ski resort is non-existent. No mentions in literature, no details until when the lifts were actually in operation in the end, whether they ever started operation at all. No evidence of a connection to the first Poma lifts at Mauselaine, also built in the late 1960s. The surface lifts at Tête du Costet remain a phantom, a mystery, hidden in the shelter of the dense forest of Gérardmer for half a century now. Will the secret of their origin and their complete history ever be revealed? Currently, this question remains open. What is certain, however, is that the hidden relics will probably remain a reminder of the past for a long time. May they rest in peace for another 50 years.